Hey, what's up guys? So I got a question about sawdust and wood glue, wood fill. Why does it turn black? And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about some other wood fills that I use. But the reason why sawdust and wood glue, wood fill will turn black is because you're probably using a metal putty knife to mix it and spread it. There's something in the metal, probably the carbon, that turns the glue black. So if you want to avoid that, you can always use a metal paint stick or a plastic putty knife. The sawdust that I use when I'm making a sawdust and wood glue or sawdust and epoxy wood fill mixture is very fine sawdust. It's from my belt sander, not when I'm using something like 50 grit, but when I'm using something like 100 or 120 grit. And that'll give you a very fine sawdust, almost like a powder. Sometimes I'll also use the sawdust from my palm sander. If I put a piece of cardboard out after I sand, I might collect that. So this is all cherry sawdust, very, very fine sawdust. This is walnut sawdust. Another wood fill that I'll use is 5-minute epoxy. The nice thing about this is you can make up a little bit of wood fill, spread it out, and maybe 10 minutes later you can continue to work on the piece. So I always have a little bit of 5-minute epoxy hanging around. For bigger cracks, I'll use West System epoxy, and the reason why I use West System is simply because I have it. I'm sure other epoxies work. So I'll use a West System epoxy, I'll use a sawdust. I usually try to go darker when I'm making sawdust and epoxy or wood glue fills, because if you think of imperfections in wood, they're usually darker. So to get those wood fills darker, I'll usually take a piece of charcoal and a piece of sandpaper. I'll sand the charcoal and dump that dust into my sawdust and epoxy mixture. For small nail holes, brads, things like that, I use wax fill sticks. I get these from Mohawk, and it's kind of a color selection, and I usually will just stick around somewhere in these kind of dark walnut colors. But I always remain with that idea that if you're using wood fill, you should always go a little bit darker rather than lighter. And the last thing I'll talk about is wood fill for painted projects, and now I'm talking about nail holes. I'm not talking about big cracks. Any big cracks, things like that, I'll still work with epoxy. But for things like nail holes, I use joint compound. It sands really easy, it's very easy to use, and I've been using this now for at least 20 years and have never had a problem. So those are just a few quick tips, and that's all for now, and I'll see you next time. Hey, I'm back because I wanted to answer a quick question. On my last project, the knife block, I had a few people ask me, was there a problem with glue squeeze out inside the slots? And in fact, there was. I didn't talk about it because I didn't get any of it on camera, and that would just make the video much longer. But anyway, so after unclamping the knife block, I put the knives in the slots, and when I pulled them out, there was glue on the ends of the knives. So to fix that, I cut a piece of wood a little thinner than the slots, being careful not to break it off inside the slots, and then just stuck the wood inside the slot and pulled the glue out and then wiped it off the stick, and just continued to do that until there was no glue on the stick. And now it was fixed, it was no problem, and it's a pretty simple solution. And I think that something I'm going to start doing going forward is answering questions like these on Instagram maybe 2 or 3 days after posting a project video. And the nice thing about that is I'll be able to post a picture of the project, and then you'll be able to swipe to see 1, 2, or 3 one-minute videos answering some of those common questions. So I hope you'll check out my Instagram. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.